Like,
Yeah, I know it's a little weird, but let's get out of the ultra world and let's talk about some other stuff here. So let's start with your topic. Let's talk about warm ups. You said you wanted to talk about warming up. I don't know where you want to go with this, so take it and run. Well, what do you want to talk about when it comes to warming up these days?
yeah, I just really want to quickly go through all the race distances real quick and hear what your thoughts are and what conversations you're having with people. It's one of those things I get caught sometimes in forgetting that it's kind of not known. It's maybe a little more important than I think. Like, we pretty instinctively know what to do before a marathon, but I'm often very surprised how often people are like, oh, should I run like 2 miles before the marathon? And I'm like, no, that's nuts. Or the opposite, like they do nothing before a 5K or something. And so, um, yeah, I'd love with you to go through starting from maybe like the mile up and just kind of talk about what are you doing? Have you changed anything? And what are the different cases? Because even right before JFK, I was really laughing at a lot of people. I saw a ton of people doing like little workouts and doing hard strides and doing really big warm-ups. And I was like, that's insane for a 50 miler. And then I asked Ian on the start line, who's one of the best and oldest uh, ultra coaches in the game. I was like, isn't that crazy? He was like, no, I have people do that sometimes. I was like, well, I sure don't. And I can explain why and my logic there, but I just kind of I want to debate with you at that. Um, so let's start there. Let's start on the ultra, I guess, and we can go down. Um, so yeah, I see people doing like little workouts or little threshold, and these are things I have people do for the mile and the 5K and hard strides and like a mile or two. My thinking is you got 50 miles. There's no you're not getting out the gate in something that mechanically is dangerous, which is why sometimes we do really intense warm-ups. Like if you're going to do a mile, popping off at mile race pace cold is a recipe to get hurt. Even at JFK, the fastest people might run 6 minute pace. It's pretty hard to get hurt 6 minute pace for a pro athlete. That's like kind of weird. So my logic is okay, if the first mile, like if you only jogged maybe 5 minutes or you only did some static stretching, if the first mile is a little slower or you integrate strides into the first mile or two, you can easily roll that into your race and not waste any mileage or effort before because you have 50 and maybe you might be behind somebody the first mile or two, but you're always going to catch them towards the end because you're a little fresher. It's not like, oh, you wasted time, you'll never catch up. It's like for a 50-miler race like this, that's pretty crazy. Like if you feel good the last 8, you should be able to catch anybody you want to catch as long as you feel up to snuff. So personally, wouldn't really have anybody. I mean, it's very rare I'd have somebody doing anything, but we might talk about how to do those first 3 miles in a strategic way to get warmed up. Um, Maybe on a pro athlete, there might be something a little more intentional, like a longer set of moving walking drills, maybe 5 minutes of running, but we would probably work the warm up into the first couple of miles to not waste mileage. What are your thoughts?
I mean, I'm kind of on the same page as you. Is warm ups and race distance have an inverse relationship. So the shorter the race distance, the longer the warm up and more intense the warm up is going to be.
Yeah.
Longer the race distance, the less intense the warm up is going to be. And when it comes to ultras, in particular, is we're never touching that type of intensity or speed or even effort for the vast majority. If you're not going to touch, might not touch it at all. So like if you're warming up at and you're doing strides and you're doing, you know, skipping drills and some threshold work, like you're warming up systems you're not going to touch the whole day. So while I understand that like it can make you feel better right off the gun, you're also burning a little glycogen. You're also, spending unnecessary time on your feet, in my opinion, at least. So like for myself and coaching an ultra athlete, it would be like, hey, especially if it's cold, let's move a little bit. Let's walk. Let's do some dynamic drills. Let's get you opened up. Let's not just go right from sitting down and then running immediately. Let's at least get you moving a little bit, but I wouldn't have you do anything more than that. And I can see for a race like JFK, if you are going to run 6 minute pace, yeah, let's jog for 5 minutes and do some strides, some drills. Let's do some leg swings. Let's at least get you so you're not feeling bad right off the gun. But even for an athlete like that, I wouldn't have them do more than like a 5 minute jog with some light strides and drills because I don't see a need for it.
Yeah. And yeah, like the thing that always cracks me up is when you go to ultras, and I get it a little bit, but you watch the start line, everyone takes off running. People don't realize how much of ultras are walking. And so people like warmed up running, they get off the start line, they run a mile, and they immediately start walking. In my head, I'm like, I wish you had flipped that and we didn't waste that whatever mile you ran before and you just walked off the line, and those 2 miles you were going to run, we ran somewhere on the course that gets you further towards the finish line. Because some people only have so many running miles in them, and I don't want any of them outside of the competition time. And so, yeah, like, and if someone's worried about not being warmed up, it's like, oh, I need to walk for a little bit, I need to jog. It's like, do that at the gun, like walk off the start line, like then do your 5 minute jog, walk a little, like you whatever protocol we set or you think you need, you can do that off the line, and at least you're moving towards the finish.
Like, bud, you're going to be out here for 16 hours. You have got plenty of time to warm up. Like, you don't need to do that ahead of time. And honestly, like, if you're like super geared up and warmed up ahead of the race, like to me, that's could be a recipe for getting out way too hard. And then all of
Yeah.
a sudden you run that first mile hard, you feel good, and then you're in a group that's a little bit over your head. And then 15 miles later, you're totally fucked because you are, 15 minutes ahead where you need to be, and you've been running a minute per mile too fast. Like that's, to me, that's another one of the risks where I'd rather you feel a little janky off the gun, take your time, ease into it, be a group or two back from where you want to be. You have so much time to make up ground. Like if you're having a good day, you'll make that up and then some. So let's just be conservative there and safe. But
Well, yeah, like you're saying, like if you're too warmed up, it's probably just gonna be easier for you to get out too fast.
mhm.
Like that's the only thought I had when I did Pikes, because it starts like a mile or two on the road, and I looked like I remember at one point this lady came up to me, and it's a road section, so I'm probably running like 6:30 pace, which for me is not too crazy. And this lady's next to me, like feels like she's sprinting, hyperventilating. I'm like, lady, we're about to climb a 14er. Like you are lactic, you are like VO2 max right now. Like what are you doing? Uh, like if you have that kind of effort, wait till we're like up there, then do that. So yeah, and just with how much people walk and hike, even almost everybody in these races walks and hikes. And so it's just better to do that. So at least you're moving in the direction of the finish line. Um, let's transition that into the marathon. Pretty similar. Most people, I say 5 to 10 minutes. I think the hard thing is for the marathon, though, there is this weird thing of like people are like, well, I won't be warmed up enough. I'm like, yes. And so we talk about, well, there's lots of drills, there's lots of active stretching stuff. But for most people, especially like a lot of the people we coach who are like BQ people, there is a little bit of known, you're not going to be 100% warmed up by the time the gun goes. Like that's just a little bit like, that's what this is. Like the first mile might suck, right?
Mhm. Yeah,
Um,
I approach it. It depends, and so much of this depends on the race you're going to do. Because
yeah,
if you're running majors, you're running these big races, like your opportunity to warm up is going to be super limited. You might be stuck in a corral for 90 minutes before your race, and so you're not jogging. You're not going to be able to do what you want to do ahead of that, which is tricky. Um, for those, so
well, even then, you can't even run the way you want to run the first few miles, so it doesn't really
correct.
matter as much. Like you're
Yeah.
boxed in.
So, like, what I tell an athlete kind of depends on what race they're going to do. Like, if it's a smaller race where they're going to have an opportunity to warm up, 5 minutes of jogging, let's do some dynamic drills, let's do some strides. That's really all you need. I'd still rather you be under warmed up and take that first mile to get warmed up and be conservative than to be over warmed up and then be out like a bat out of hell or like a shot out
Yeah,
of a gun, going out way too hard. Personally, when I was racing, I would run a mile or I would run an easy 10 minutes, super easy. I would
yeah,
crank it up to like marathon effort for the last 2 to 3 minutes just to kind of get that cadence, take a pee, do a couple strides. That was it. I would still rather feel not warmed up enough that first mile than to be a little bit too deep into it. I just needed to get the legs moving.
yeah.
And so
Well,
And then for
that's a
go
really
ahead.
good point. Same exact thing for me. And these are two guys, you and I, who ran 90, 100-mile weeks most of our career. So even us, we don't want to run more than 10 minutes. We're working with people who might be running 30 miles a week. Like that 10 minutes is far more valuable and impactful for them, like them running a little bit too much before a marathon. The risk is a lot higher versus like we could easily have run 2 mile, maybe even a 3 mile warm up for a marathon. It wouldn't hurt us that much. But for some people, that's a lot. It's a lot of running.
Yeah, that's 10% of your weekly volume, which is not insignificant.
Nope.
Um, and for me, like I wouldn't, I'm fine if the first 2 miles feels fast. Like if I'm not like fully warmed up and I'm supposed to be running 5:10 or 5:15 pace that first 2 miles, like I'm okay if it feels my legs aren't quite there yet. And then because I know I'm gonna settle in, at some point in that first 4 or 5 miles, and it's going to be fine. And I try to convey that to my athletes, like, hey, those first couple miles, like, they're not going to feel great. Like, slow down. I'd rather you be 15 seconds slow cumulatively over the first 2 miles than to be 15 seconds fast. Like, take your time, let yourself warm up into it. You can make up so much more ground in the second half if you're smart in the first half. Like, and especially for if you're doing like a Chicago or a New York where you just don't have the ability to get out and jog, like, yeah, you're going to have to take that time to warm up ahead of time or warm up during the race and almost throw away those first 2 miles and then, be ready to actually start racing 2 or 3 miles into it.
Yep. Anything else on warming up for the marathon?
No, I
Um,
would I would just mention eating. Like if you do a jog, like pop that gel between your warm up jog and the start of the race. Just maybe half of it is like psychosomatic, but topping off those glycogen stores, you did burn a little bit of sugar there. You've burnt sugar since you've eaten your breakfast. So like just top it off. Take a gel. Not a big deal. You're not going to feel it, but it is helpful.
that is always like I tell that to every single person. Bring it with you no matter what. Like
Mhm.
worst case, you toss it or you just run with it. But I've even brought like a granola bar to the start line or having a water bottle, like having all that stuff just in case you need any of it. And like you said, it's really good to hit that gel right before. Um, that is a big part of the warm up. Like just making sure those are the things I'm thinking about more. Like, did we use the bathroom? Are we good glycogen wise? Are we good hydration wise? Getting those parts right more than like, yeah, there's not so much we can do running wise.
I would sacrifice my warm up jog to take a good dump before a marathon, especially
Or pee.
or pee, like early morning races. Like I'll cut that short to spend an extra 15 minutes in the bathroom because I just want to be totally emptied out. So
100%. You want to feel comfortable, ready to go, so it's not a problem when you get out there. And
yes,
then we kind of said it, but like since we can't run as much, we definitely do more active mobility, those type of warm ups. Pulling your knee up to your chest, heel to butt, some of those leg swings, skipping, any drills like that. I tell people to spend more time on those type of things where it's not actually running and not firing up the running systems, but we can still get the legs feeling good and loose, ready to boogie.
absolutely, 100%.
Okay, working our way down, just a couple left, half 10K. Changes a little bit. Half isn't a scary, like volume wise, like we can do, generally for most of my folks, it's probably a 2 mile. Um, could be 10 minutes, 20 minutes, something in there. Couple strides. Typically don't do much elsewise because it's also one of those things that the first mile can be a little more relaxed. We're not burning off the line. We can work our way into it. Yeah, so it might just be a mile or two and some strides. For the half, 10K, 5K, that's kind of start where I start thinking about, do we need a little tiny workout in here? It's 5K for sure. It's 10K sometimes. Like, do we need a little threshold 3 minute or, you know, sometimes I'll do 2 to 4 by 1 minute at threshold and then some strides just where those systems are turned on and we feel ready to go and not flat off the start line because we don't have as much time. A lot of the other same things apply for me. We're still taking that gel to the start line. We're still going to do a lot of active mobility, trying to get there really early. Any other thoughts on the half 10K, 5K?
I would say to me, the half lives in a different world than the 5K, 10K do, and I
Yeah.
would treat the half warm up and this kind of depending on how fast the athlete is, because
Mhm.
if you are a sub elite to elite athlete and you're closer to an hour, it's a different intensity than
Yeah,
someone who's going to run closer to 2 hours. And so the needs of that warm up are going to be a little bit different. So
yeah,
for a higher end athlete, we'll say BQ or, 80 minutes and faster, something like that. You're going to do a little more intense. We're going to go 2 miles. We're going to finish. I love all my warm ups for races to be progressive rather than doing like 4 by 1 minute. Like, hey, run that first, 10 minutes of that 2 mile jog easy. Then we're gonna ramp up the last three of that. So you're gonna start to just
I
like
like that.
ease your way into and finish it right at half pace. Like that last 30 seconds is at half pace.
Yeah.
And then we get into drills and then we do
I will
strides.
say, often that feels very uncomfortable.
It feels horrible. It
Yeah.
almost never feels good. You're not ready for it, but
Yes.
it's like we got to shock the body a little
Which
bit.
is why we do it. It's like it's
Yeah.
better to feel awful, and then it kind of sends that signal to the body like, "Hey, this is what we're doing." And so you get some of that awful feeling out there. Then when we get on the start line, it's not much of a shock, which is why we do that.
Especially for like a faster athlete, it's just like that you're running, you're locking into threshold pace, which is like your peak of what you can hold for an hour right away, and you're going to be
Yeah.
pretty uncomfortable when you're running a fast half pretty early.
Yeah.
And so just like getting your body ready for that intensity of an effort, I think is super important. For someone who's more of like a 2 hour half marathoner, you do a similar thing, 10 minutes, maybe progress a little bit, and then drills and strides. That's closer to a marathon warm up than my 75-minute half marathoners would be.
Yeah.
And then 10K is going to
Because
be
like
more
you said, it's a different system. For those faster guys, you probably are at threshold. For the other guys, it's in that in between zone where there's still a lot of aerobic. It's not as hard of a mechanical task, so we don't need that intensity. It isn't at true threshold. So yeah, we don't need as crazy of a warm up.
correct. Yeah, exactly. You have a little more time. You have a little more ability and flexibility to kind of warm up into it if you're a 2 hour half marathoner, where versus if you're trying to run 75 minutes, you got to be ready to kind of like boogie right at the gun.
So then 5K, 10K stuff. What are you doing there? Because like we said, that's an intense. There is a mechanical part. Like you got to have those legs warmed up enough to get moving off the start line. It is different. Like I said, I typically have people doing small workouts beforehand, pretty intentional strides. What are you doing there?
For most of my athletes, it's really just an extension of what we would do for like a half. We're gonna do the progression. We're gonna do some drills and some strides. I wouldn't say I recommend having them do like little mini workouts. We just have to get your lungs working, get your legs
Yeah,
moving, so you're not off the gun feeling you're not off the line feeling like you're sprinting right away. So
yeah,
those strides, we're doing them at mile race pace or faster. We want you moving faster than 5K pace. We want a little bit of that, aerobic or threshold stimulus by cranking it up during the warm up, and then spending more time with the dynamic movements. So, spending more time with the stretches, and then doing high knees and butt kicks. And if you do A skips and B skips, let's get a good set of those in. So your hips are opened up and you're ready to be a little more explosive off the line.
I will say generally for us, it's probably we're doing even more strides as we're getting down into 5K in the mile, like where maybe some of those other races might just be 3 to 5 strides. When we get down towards 5K in the mile, it could be 6 to 10 even of like
You're probably
really
doing
making
3 or 4
sure.
with your trainers on. You're doing your drills and you're doing your hip mobility. Then you're putting your spikes on. Then you're doing another 4 or 5 on the track. Yeah. It's a little bit of a different ball game.
Yeah. Or your flats if you're on the road. But yeah, it
Yeah.
might be, and then you might notice you need to tie your shoe differently. You might do a couple. And often, I think for us personally, we know, but we also tell people usually you're trying to go until you get a feeling. Like you need 6 or 7 or 8, but as you go, eventually there's like a tension you get with your stride where you're like, okay, this feels right. I feel kind of ready to roll. And so you kind of keep going until you find that point. Sometimes you get out there and after 4 or 5, you're like, whoo, it's system's ready to go. I feel springy. And sometimes you'll kind of stop. You're like, nope, I'm ready. Things are rolling. Sometimes you've done 8 and you're like, I need to like rip a 30-second one because there's still something not turned on here. And so learning and listening and feeling that of like, do I need another hard? Sometimes you just got to rip, like I said, 20 or 30 seconds to just turn the stuff on in the body and wake up.
Yeah,
Um,
especially, and that's like with the shorter distances, like the weather plays a more of a role. Because
Yeah,
if it's like a warm day, it's way easier to find that like locked in feel. Like a
very
warm day, you
true.
only need 3 or 4 strides. Like your muscles
Right.
are lubed up,
And
everything
same with
feels
the warm
good.
up, you might cut 5-10 minutes. You don't want to overheat.
Sure, especially if it's close to hot, or if you live in a place like Phoenix or somewhere where it gets humid, like you're not going to warm up nearly as long as if you would be doing a 5K in January in New Jersey. Like
Well,
it's a
and
different
also a
ball
pro
game.
tip there, adding to the warm up, like people ask all the time about like, well, should I wear this during the race? And it's like, well, if you can warm up enough to where you don't need that hoodie or whatever it is, it's like, oh, maybe you add an extra mile so your core body temp's up enough so that you can have the apparel choices that you actually want.
Yeah.
Because that can make a big difference too. That's a good tip. And then same thing, we're still probably having that gel, still trying to make sure our systems are all right. I talk all the time about being there early enough so that we can handle all the issues. Um, but yeah, anything else? We
I mean, I think the clothing is a good thing to harp on. Like, have for your warm up, have warm ups. You know, make sure you're not just like running around in your tank top and your shorts or half tights or whatever. You know, even if it's a little warm, I think this is partially mental as well as physical too. Like changing from your t-shirt to your singlet, there's something
yes,
about that. Just like changing your shoes, like you're
yes,
flipping a switch in your mind. So I would
yes,
also, and for cold days, like overdress. You don't want to be standing around shivering, or
yes,
jogging around shivering. Like you'd rather be overdressed and sweat through your hoodie in your warm up
yes.
than be underdressed and still cold when you finish it. So just making sure you're dressing appropriately and taking that into account is really important.
Yeah, dude, that's so smart. I remember like in middle school, our track coaches were like very adamant that like we needed to have a sweat going before you like started things. Which makes sense in some ways. That's huge using your clothes strategically. Like I think it's why people wear suits, like when you dress that way, you act a different way. And then like you said, with like weather and stuff, like use warm-ups to your advantage. Help, like let those extra layers help you actually physically warm up. Um, and that's really smart. Man, I think that's pretty good. I don't know if I have anything else on warming up. Um, but yeah, I mean, we have talked a lot about that, and that is a thing that we try to push on people is like switching the shoes and the clothes. Like it's something people fight back on sometimes about shoe changes, but there is a real big mental thing of like, oh, when I put these on, that's when I go to race. That's when I'm like really working. So I do love that one a lot. Um, yeah, cool. Any last bits, thoughts on warming up?
No, I think we covered it. I think we did a good job at going down the lines. I mean, and the shorter distance you get, like mile 800, like that's almost a totally different ball game. Like if you're racing that kind of stuff on the track, like you want to be in like your second wind almost for some of those races. Like you want to be
Yeah, 8 in the mile,
really warmed up.
we're doing a workout before.
Hmm.
Like yeah, yeah, there's a real whole procedure we're gonna do before that to make sure we're ready.